profitable, beneficial, productive representation of their workforce that represents the population. So a lot of the work that we do is to really change these numbers and allow all the tech companies to at least have equal representation of their communities. Because here in America, as you can see, the U.S. population is 6% Asian, but it's definitely, but our overall tech industry is definitely heavy sided towards the Asian community and the white community. So there's an imbalance there. There's a lack of equity there, and that's a lot of the work that we get into. So through AUTM Horizons, this is one of the ways that we provide exposure, that we really connect you to what all the different tech pathways can be. And Donald Scott II, when he comes up, he's going to dive deep into his journey, what his career pathways was, and answer any questions you may have, so we can address some of these challenges here and really begin to expand the knowledge and understanding of technology, so we can be able to really change the tech ecosystem that we see here. So Donald, I will hand it off to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So just for visibility and transparency, a few of us ran through these slides just a couple minutes ago. But after that, I was thinking through some of the talking points and ideas. One thing I'll say is I years ago when I lived in California, I had the opportunity to hear Kamala Harris introduce herself a few times to people. And we went to a handful of events, and what I learned is that they have a script that they follow. And so if you go to more than 2 events, you already know what they're going to say because someone told them that those bullet points were the most important bullet points. So what I'm going to say is, for those who were on the call previously, you'll probably hear something different because I don't have scripted bullet points, although we do have a deck to go through. But following up on that conversation, and especially around this topic of equity, and then thinking about how we are in the world, I'll recommend another book that I just finished. It is called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. And it's kind of philosophical. It kind of looks forward and backward, but it talks about how we should be preparing to interact with technology, especially from a emotional perspective when you're talking about biotech in interacting with big data and the ability for, let's say, a wearable device to know whether or not I'm feeling stressed or if I'm feeling like an 8 or a 10, right? And so when you ask me, am I feeling what am I feeling 0 through 10? Instead of thinking for myself what I'm feeling, there's a potential that I just look down at my watch and tell you, and my watch knows better than I do. There are implications to that concept, right? And it's something that people are working on. It's very heavy tech. It's also ethical, and all the other terminology or all the other words that come into that. But this conversation was making me think through that. For the other audience or the larger group, I would say this deck is a cool deck to me. But feel free to ask questions, interrupt me, or just be like, I have a question that's unrelated to anything on the screen. That is totally fine, and I actually encourage it. You will not be interrupting because I'm a professional talker, and this is meant for you to be able to ask questions, interact, learn maybe, but just because I have things on the slide doesn't mean that you will actually be learning what you need to hear. So just keep that in mind. So I'll start by saying, are there any questions before I start? If not, I'll get started. So I'm from Chicago. Bolingbrook is a suburb that I'm from. I'll try not to say as I mentioned earlier, but some of you have heard this. There is a space inside of Chicago where a majority of Black people are from. And if you are not from that space, either the South Side or the West Side, then you're not really from Chicago. So sometimes people from Chicago will give a hard time to other people from Chicago if they are not from the city proper. So it's something that I try to say now in general, because actually the reason is I have a buddy who would correct me every time. He's from the city, from the South Side. I would say I'm also from Chicago, and then he would say, no, he's from Bolingbrook. And he's been doing that for a long time, long enough where I put it in my own deck. I played 3 sports in high school. At the time, I needed to be out of the house. And so those 3 sports allowed me to get home very late, usually around 5:30, 6 o'clock, rather than, coming off the bus about 3. So those extra 3 hours were very important for my own personal growth and development relative to home life. I'll say that. I did love math, chemistry, and physics while I was in high school. And so the combination of sports and then doing well in school led to the opportunity for me to attend Princeton University, where I also played football. And given some of my dedication, but also maybe what would I say? Competitive nature probably is what leads to a football award. So I can be very competitive sometimes to the detriment of others, but we'll leave that for later. And then in general, I've roamed all over the country. So Princeton is in Jersey, which is in red. I've lived in Chicago, California, North Carolina, and now I am in Austin, Texas. But more specifically, I live north in Pflugerville. And relative to something that I like to do is I enjoy driving. And so I've driven all over the place actually, but some of the trips that I'm most proud of myself is I've driven from California to North Carolina, and I did that trip in about 3 days. And then I've driven from North Carolina to Austin twice in 2 weeks. But that first trip from North Carolina to Austin, that's actually a 24-hour trip that I completed in 20 hours, which means in a set of 24 hours, I only slept for 4 hours and then put the rest of those hours down in the highway. There are very few people who can do things like that. But like I said, I can sometimes be obnoxiously competitive. And so I think about ways that I can do things that other people can't say that they could do as well. So that's a little bit about my personality. Go to the next one. Actually, I'll tell you this other thing while we go to the next slide. This one is from Michael, actually. I think, in this line where it says entrepreneur. So if you guys heard Michael say, he's the CEO and president of the nonprofit Autumn. I actually started a nonprofit. This will be in the next slide, actually, but we can stay here. I started a nonprofit because I also wanted to introduce myself as a co-founder of a nonprofit. And it is a good reason. Starting a nonprofit is good as long as you have good intentions. But I also did it because of competition. Because when other people say that they are co-founder or president, I was like, I want to be co-founder, president, and CEO as well. So I would say, as we talk about, and if you ask questions about my background as an entrepreneur, there's more than just the nonprofit, but the nonprofit was specifically because I was surrounding myself around people who always represented some other organization, and I wanted to represent another organization as well. So anyway, back in 2003, I graduated from college. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I kind of had a good experience in Hollywood the junior year summer, and I thought that I wanted to be a Hollywood agent, but without getting into too much detail, reality said no, and so I needed to come back home. And so when I graduated from school, actually, a majority of my peers already had their lives set out for them, and they knew what they wanted to do from a career perspective, but I did not. And so I graduated from school and started working in retail. Part of the discussion around like navigating life and using your experiences to support your future goals, right, is you have to sometimes take a step back and experience something that may not be optimal relative to your peers or to what other people believe that you should be doing because you've done something like, for example, graduate from Princeton. So instead of being in Hollywood, I ended up at 900 North Michigan Avenue, which, again, for people in Chicago, this is on the Magnificent Mile. And more specifically, being inside of the Bloomingdale's building provided me an opportunity to interact with, let's say, an upper echelon, right, of individuals who feel like they deserve to be treated a certain way because of the amount of money that they make, because of the fact that they're in there shopping. I didn't personally like it, and it was, I'll use the word humbling, but it was also obnoxious for me to learn that people looking for a service to be provided to them felt entitled to that service. And so there was a bit of a learning experience that happened inside of my retail space where being able to learn how to speak, interact, operate in that space of upper echelon provides for me now more confidence when I'm preparing to speak in front of others. I also volunteered though, so especially when you're working in retail, you're constantly smile and say hi really is what you're supposed to do, and then help them buy stuff. But from a volunteering perspective, I had a number of friends who also were there for Teach for America in Chicago. And so because of a passion for education, I also volunteered a decent amount. And so I did enjoy even, 2003 actually doesn't seem that long ago to me, but it's possible. Let's see. I'm what, 15 years? It's possible that somebody here wasn't born in 2003, I think. But anyway, it wasn't that long ago, to be honest. But the lessons learned from back then still carry with me today. And so, when I then point out this other building is the Citibank building. So my first job at Kensington Resources, the office was in the Citibank building. And I remember not being happy that I couldn't go to Hollywood, not necessarily being proud that I was working in retail, but then feeling like when I got to the Citibank building that my peers would be impressed. And I think I say that from how I remember feeling back then about what self-esteem and what self-confidence was rooted in for me at that time. Now, I'm older, I'm a full-grown adult. I think every one of these lessons has helped shape me both professionally, emotionally, spiritually, and I think, just take your journey, right? Navigate it as best you can, give 100% in every experience, but also know that sometimes, like it was said on here, sometimes your days will be a 4, sometimes your days will be a 10. But ultimately, if you can average out to around an 8, then you're probably doing pretty good with life. So we'll go to the next one. Next slide, please. Okay, so why am I a speaker? So as mentioned, I have a heart for service, and I certainly do love talking. When I was younger, there's a little bit in here, right? There's a heart for service and I'm passionate about education. So when I was younger, life was kind of challenging. I'll say that. And but what I remember most, and what was established in me early on and often and regularly from my mother and my grandmother, is that education is going to be the most important aspect of my life in order to be successful. And it's my responsibility to also pass that education to others as best I can. And so even with the Culture Crawl podcast, which I'm a co-host with Mr. Michael Ward, and we meet every Friday to talk with a handful of people about random things. Even inside of the podcast is very educational, because what we've learned is that some people are, for whatever reason, right? You may have an echo chamber. You may be too busy to consume information, and maybe you're not in a space where you can fact check everybody, right? But listening to people have a communication and a dialogue, whether they agree or disagree, helps create the opportunity for yourself to question the topic, right? And questions help lead you to an answer, or at least better questions. I support Autumn 100%. I believe that Michael is a great energy inside of Austin. He's very passionate about both the community and the world. But I think okay, so fine, I'll give him a little shout out here. What I think made me be like, okay, I think we can work together is the focus on a solution. There are a lot of people who like to talk about challenges, but there are very few people who actually get up and try to do something, right? And even with Matt and Julie being on this phone, relative to the organization that they're operating, doing it is much harder than people realize, especially when we all have peers who do a lot of talking. So I would say, just for the group of you out there, like, yes, talk about your ideas, share your ideas with friends, but if you find that your friends are not pushing you forward to do tangible, actionable things, keep your friends, but make new ones and help them help you push forward. And doing whatever it is you want to do. You may really like talking about one thing, but prefer to do this other thing. I would say, being active, especially in the community, but being active is probably going to make you more successful than talking about it. Although talking about your successes usually leads to more success. So what else? We have representation, visibility, and responsibility. So on the topic of representation and visibility, I think it's important in general that everyone see people doing the things that everyone else sees people doing. So in this big photo, right, I'm in there in the Cal shirt, and this is at the day of service at, I forgot it already, at the, what is it, Michael? If you're not on.
It was the United Way, the Greater Austin United Way Day of service with them, okay?
I don't know why I can't remember United Way, but fine, whatever. Anyway, so those are my kids, right? And so what we're doing is volunteering. And I want my children to grow up knowing that volunteering is important. But at the same time, in this photo, I'm also representing my organization, which is Avanade. My parent company is here in purple shorts as Accenture. And then I'm also on the board of the Princeton Club of Austin. And so there are people inside of this photo who represent that organization as well. And so from a representation and visibility perspective, right, we want people to always know that they are a part of a whole. And it doesn't necessarily have to be homogenous. So inside of my organization, I'm also the Alliance's chair. And so that presents a lot of opportunities. One opportunity is that we were able to meet with my new CEO, who is in the top right photo in the middle in the dress. That was in New York during some event. But that volunteer experience allows me to then be in front of different leaders. But part of my true passion is to ensure that every group that feels underrepresented should be represented in the organization. So when I started at Avanade, there was organizations already available for vets, women, and the LGBT plus community, but we did not have one for the Black community, Hispanic community, or Asian community. But since when I arrived, not that I'm saying it was me only, it was a team of us, but I do believe that I added a bit of a spark. That's more of a different topic. Personality-wise, I carry multiple personalities and a lot of energy. But so since then, since January 2018, Inspire, which is our Black employee network, is operating as a full capacity employee resource group. And we've brought online both Pang, which is our professional Asian networking group, and Adelante, which is our group for Hispanic and Latinx community. Both of those groups, I wouldn't say that there's no me or I really, but I have given energy to others so that we as a collective group push forward, right? And so, but that goes to this last bullet. I believe that we have a responsibility, and one of my gifts is encouraging people to do things that I want them to do. And so I have a heart for service. I believe that visibility and representation matters. And so then, because I have the energy and the capacity for encouraging people to do things that I want them to do, we have more visibility and representation inside of Avanade, and we continue to grow. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Actually, we can go to the next slide, but I'll pause there too and ask if there are any questions related to anything I've said, or even unrelated, if there's an idea that was sparked by something I said. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay. So my personal journey then has been one focused on, kind of getting out of town for the most part, staying out of the house, which led to sports led to college then led to learning about what I think I'm good at. And then you get a job, and once you get a job, I mean, it's that's it, you got to work. I'll say this. And this is, I think, one of the topics in our podcast that just came up, and I think it's very relevant, especially now. Stay away from debt as long as you can. Usually what happens is people will get a job, and then as soon as you get a job, you get a credit card, and then you start buying things that you don't actually need. That is the American way as a function of our economy and our society, but that does not mean that it is in your best interest to get a lot of debt, because once you are in debt, you are less free to do what you want to do. Anyway, that's a tangent. But so as a consultant, why did I get into it? As mentioned, maybe only briefly, I didn't really know what consulting was. I'd never met any consultants, and people don't really talk about consulting. I think it's bigger now, but back then, consulting was like a hidden industry almost. I think with the rise of digital technology, consulting and technology consulting in general has opened the doors to a broader audience. But I got the job primarily because I had a tech background, and on the phone, I was able to convince and confirm, not even confirm, I would say I was able to prove to the recruiter that I had the social skills and the technology skills to be able to articulate what it is we're talking about if we're going to be sitting in front of clients. I thoroughly enjoy consulting, but I would say in college, right, I was supposed to be chemi, but I realized that I didn't necessarily want to be in a lab and be poring over an organic chemistry book. Also, to be honest, it was too thick. And so I'm not saying shy away from challenges, but what I am saying is sometimes you have to appreciate your limits and know what it is you're willing to sign up for. And I was not willing to sign up for organic chemistry. And so I went to electrical engineering, which, depending on who you're talking to, is not much of a downgrade, but I had more friends in the EE environment. But inside of that experience, what I also learned is I was more social than technical, even when talking about circuits and digital signal processing. I am a fan of math, and I still think that my favorite, I can't recite it, but there's a Schrodinger wave equation that basically uses no numbers, and it's all imaginary numbers, and that equation is the reason why cell phones work. And so if you think about, that's kind of nerdy, but if you think about why cell phones work, oh yeah, I'll explain, Kemi. If you think about why cell phones work, the assumption is that it's basic math. And since we all have cell phones for the most part, in our pockets, they are ubiquitous. But in reality, the math behind a cell phone makes absolutely no sense. Not from like a 1 + 1 = 2 perspective. Going back to Chemi, so Chemi is chemical engineering. I would say you probably find most chemical engineers doing food science type stuff these days, or people who do genetically modified organisms, or anybody that's cloning sheep. That's usually Chemi, and then, or even more specifically, while folks are talking about getting this vaccine for coronavirus. Those are probably large groups of chemical engineers and other scientists that are working together. You have to know how molecules bond, and the carbon molecule is annoying. And so I kind of was done with chemistry after I learned about all the things you can do with carbon. But I'm not invested in carbon the way I should be. Although it is the building block of life. So that's just a thing. So I would say just from a consulting perspective, these are the states that I've worked in over my career. And actually missing here is I've worked in Brazil as well, in Rio. So for a little while, I was an international business consultant in Rio and also in Toronto. Although Toronto is only international because of the way we think about borders, not because I had to get on a plane and fly very far. But I would say for people for whom travel and what is that word? Extroverts. If you are energized by interacting with new and different people, and like seeing different towns and are not overwhelmed by the unknown, consulting is a good way to get paid to travel around and visit different cities. So I would say, once you start looking for jobs, right, use consulting as a keyword, whether you say like technology consulting or biomedical consulting, whatever word you think of that sounds cool, media consulting, anything that's like, I would like to do this type of job, just add the word consulting on the back of it and see if jobs pop up. Because the consulting industry is a little bit more dynamic than your standard 9-to-5 full-time employee experience, such that for me specifically, and based on what I've learned, office politics become very important just about year 7 or 8 in an office, or maybe even 7 or 8. Let's see, can I increase my what? Oh, what's the question? How can, I saw a question pop up, but maybe if you can come off and ask it, what was I saying? Oh, office politics, yes. If you find yourself inside of the space where you're climbing a ladder, and that ladder is only at one company, you probably will have invested a number of years into that organization. And once you've invested a number of years, you are invested. And now what you are is you are offering up your power to move up and around to those around you. Whereas inside of consulting, we never really have to deal with that office politics except for the politics of consulting. And consultants usually have more flexibility for going to another consulting firm, or even going to be full-time employee at a firm that you may like, or you can even be an independent contractor, depending on how much of an expert you are. And I would say after 10 years of any consulting or of any type of work, you can pretty much say that you are an expert, even if you're not. Which leads me to probably next page, please. Which leads me to things you should know. I'll skip down to number 3, which is always be learning, because tech changes every day. there are no real experts anymore in much technology that's cutting edge, because a new platform will be deployed and upgraded every 6 months, every 3 months, potentially every day, depending on what type of work you're doing. So if you are the type that likes, I would actually say, if you know you're not the type that likes to learn, work at making yourself the type that likes to learn, because learning is what's going to be most important in the near future. And actually, I'll say this too, inside of that book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, what it says is, right now, for me, right, I'm 40, it's unlikely that I will go from being a technology consultant to a market research professional in the next 10 years, 20 years, because there's no reason really, based on the way society has operated, for me to do that. But for the generation coming up right now, that group of people will probably have to reinvent themselves every 5 to 7 years or some number like that, because technology will change so rapidly and jobs will disappear so quickly that if you were a carpenter for a number of years, 20 years, and then you decide, actually, this is a true, I heard this story from another guy. Carpenter for 20 years, decided then to go back and become a technology consultant. Now he's a technology consultant. You're not going to be a carpenter for 20 years in this next group, right? Because carpentry will become 3D printed, for example. You're not going to be a Python developer for the next 30 years, because Python has only been around for 5 and they're already working on something better. So you always have to be learning no matter what it is. Now, I will say, going back to bullet point 1, technology is broad, and also mentioning the book Emotional Intelligence that I mentioned in the previous call. There's another book that I'll recommend to everyone. I got to remember what it is. Sorry for the pause, but I'm trying to run down my library. Conversational intelligence. It was close, but I couldn't remember what that word is. Conversational intelligence talks about how you choose your language in relation to the emotional intelligence that you should have relative to how words make people feel. And the reason I'm going to say this, especially from a technology is broad perspective, but more specifically on how I'm probably going to help my children navigate their experience, is personality helps you kind of determine what you're likely to be most successful at. You can be a relationship manager, coder, salesperson, project manager, etc. My oldest is probably going to be a coder because he likes to compete from a I know more than you perspective. So he can sit in front of a computer and try to type things out and be the best. He likes that. My middle is probably going to be a salesperson because his emotional intelligence is very mature. So he makes people smile. He wants you to be around him, and he makes you want to be around. Right now, the way that plays itself out is wherever he goes, he makes new friends, and then ultimately they start playing tag, right? He knows how to get people to chase him. It's a crazy skill, but my guess is at some point he'll be in sales. And then my last one, we're expecting to be a rock star, but we'll see how that goes. But anyway, the point is, all of that can be done inside of technology, right? Because whether you're sitting in front of a computer coding, selling technology, or interacting with the digital experience of what music will be, all of those experiences are from a technology space. And so it's very broad, which is why, if we're talking about the Austin urban technology movement and the topics that Michael brings up about ensuring that everyone has access to technology, not only the technology, but also access to people who can say the technology is not scary, and also that there are plenty of opportunities for everyone. I think that story is very important. So it's important for me to share with you, and it's important for you to share with others, peers, parents, and friends, right? Even your younger or older siblings, right? There's an opportunity for everyone inside of the technology space, especially because we become a more digitally focused group. And then ultimately, I would say, take risks. And so this will roll into like asking questions, right? The best way to learn about yourself, to learn about others, and to learn what other people don't know is to ask questions. I would say be confident in asking questions, and also be equally confident in saying, I don't know. Many people, organizations, and society, I think, is moving toward a space now where instead of not being honest, there was a time where it was okay to say, make up a story if someone asks you a question. I think those days are passing us, where if you're supposed to be the expert, then yes, know what you're supposed to know. That's a function of being prepared. But if someone asks you a question that you don't know the answer to, be honest about it instead of trying to talk around it, because people can tell when you are being honest or dishonest. And I think that also goes into this function of, or this conversation around emotional intelligence, such that we need to know what our limits are, and be honest about it. So the next slide says, are there any questions? But this little bullet point right here says, take risks, own your voice and your space, and it's okay to ask questions. In fact, asking questions is how you get noticed. So I'll end there, and I'll ask, are there any questions?
We don't have a question, but I like you speak a lot. I like a lot this one. I like this one. Like I like map too. I know like I can use the technology for the sort of problem with the map. I like map too. I like it.
Yeah, I think, actually I was telling one of them, I have 3 boys, so I'm not sure who I'm talking to all the time. But I was telling one of them, math is the language that connects the world.
Yes.
Right? So, and he was asking, well, how do we know that? And I was like, well, somebody had one thing, and then they had another thing, and they had to figure out a way to explain that they had 2. Regardless of what that word 2 is in a different language, whatever, right? But if I hand you an object and I hand you another object, we both know that you have 2 of them. And up from there is the most complex math, right? Actually, the conversation started with gravitational pull. So I was talking to my oldest because that is a mature discussion. But we were talking about how all beings that have mass have a gravitational pull, but our mass is not big enough for it to matter.
Yeah.
But actually, I'll say this, from an energy perspective, and maybe there's another book that I read that's like a body language book or something. There's some book. Actually, you know what? I'll give you guys another book, actually. Emotion Code is a book that I would recommend. It is related to emotional intelligence, but the emotion code is maybe a little bit more spiritual. But it has to do with how our emotions function as energy. And then if you think about emotional energy and gravitational pull, you can actually say that this is true, if I walk into a room, people feel my energy. Now, does that mean that my gravitational pull is stronger than others? Maybe. Does that mean that some magnetic field radiating from my brain to my heart, something, I don't know, expands? Who knows, right? That's why I said it's a little bit spiritual. But if you just pay attention to the fringes at least, it helps you connect the dots on how you might want to operate in the world, which ultimately comes back to math, right?
Yeah.
And language and connecting with others.
Yeah. That's why it's so good. I like it. Like every time the life coach give me the different classes. And she give me the classes, I tell her like, give me the math classes. She said it's finished. We don't have it more. Like I like math a lot.
Yeah, I would say too, you know, especially from a math perspective, I'll give you a little bit of detail. If inside of math, you also like statistics, statistics is the backbone now of data science. And data science will continue to grow in its importance in information technology. So if you like math and statistics, and then also find yourself programming, which you probably will at some point, if you are a mathematician and a statistician, you can learn any language, and that profession will continue to be needed. It will grow, and those people will continue to be needed. Yeah. And most people don't like statistics. I personally don't like statistics, even though I like math. But future thinking, right? As I was saying, like jobs will disappear, technology will change, things will change, but statistics will always remain, and they will always be important.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments, concerns, ideas?
All right. So then I'll go ahead and take over the presentation. But Donald, thank you again. And that was definitely a good one. And I added 2 comments in there for you. I said NASA is hiring. So just overall, I've been seeing so many emails about just NASA not having enough individuals that actually could do their jobs and have the skills that they need. So there's definitely a lot of different opportunities out there in individuals that are into STEM, you know, whether it's science, math, engineering, because there are definitely opportunities out there. And then I also mentioned the stock market. The stock market is all math. There are so many different industries out there that has math as the foundation, or have STEM as the foundation in any way, shape, or form. So I wanted to just put those 2 in there for you. But I know we're over time here, so I'll just go through these slides rather quickly. So just overall, you know, if you all want to get engaged with AUTM, you know, AUTM Horizons is one of the programs that we do, you know, offer and connect with. But overall, you could go to our website. You could download our AUTM application right now. We have an online app that has several different career pathways within inside the tech space. So if you are interested into data science, if you are interested into what those opportunities look like, you'll be able to dive in and explore that. And I'll actually do a quick test in a second once I get to the end here, just so you all can see that. And if you want, you can actually take your smartphone right now with your camera, if you have a camera on your smartphone, and just take a photo of that, and you can download the application right now. And I'll also show you where it is on our website. And then last but not least, in the bottom right corner, you have our newsletter. You can sign up right here to join our community and get engaged with all the different programming and services that we offer as well. And we're also on social media. So you can follow us at AUTMTX. And what I wanted to do rather quickly is just show you all where that website is for our online application. So let me pull this up here. You all see the online website? Perfect, cool. So this is our online application. It's on our website. When you go at the top and you click resources, you'll see AUTM Learn. Once you get here, actually, let me just do that right now. Let me just go through the steps. All right, so you go through our website. Once you get to our website, here at the top, you see resources. Once you click resources, you click on Get Trained. That will open up a new window. And then once you log in and you scroll down, at the bottom, you'll see exposure. And that's when you get to have some fun. You could view any of our career exploration ideas. So if you're interested in data analysts, what does data analyst actually do? Top 10 reasons to learn cybersecurity. How to become a data analyst. So you can browse our exposure tab to really get more in-depth information just around what are some ways I could get started inside the tech industry. How can I become a tech consultant? How can I get into data science, software engineering? That's really what this partnership between myself and Julie, between Autumn and American Youthworks, is that we want to provide many different resources for you all to be successful. That is the ultimate end goal from our perspective. So that's it on my end. So I will give the reins back over to Julie. So let me stop sharing my side.